And we are live. I'm going to let people
Great.
pile in here as we get started. While they are doing so, I'm going to introduce the segment again. Some of you were in the last one with Sean Harris. Welcome back. You're not seeing double. You're seeing me double, but we are here with Alex Kelloff out of Colorado. So we're off the East Coast and down to the Rockies. Beautiful place. And I'll let him introduce himself in just a second. But for those who are new and didn't hear my spiel in the last episode, this is the Candidates of Our Dreams series. We are talking to progressive, pro-democracy, pro the United States not being a fascist dictatorship candidates in the 2026 midterm year, which has got all kinds of other elections and special things about it, which is insane. But before we get started, just a reminder that this is a homework assignment. It is not just for your entertainment. So as much as you might enjoy watching Alex and I talk, at the end, we will be plugging actionable items. You know, if anyone watches my content, you know that I'm about the action steps. We're not just sitting around bemoaning what is happening outside. We are doing what we can where we can. I also want to remind everybody that the Candidates of Our Dreams series is not meant to be a purity test. It's meant to be a conversation. There are a lot of ways to tackle the issues that we're going to be talking about from my 9-point checklist and congressional district specific items and whatnot. So there will be this isn't like ceasefire or whatever, where we yell at each other for a little while about how wrong the other person is. Nor do we expect our candidates to know everything. I have literally lobbied candidates on certain issues on some of these episodes, and it has been fantastic. So, you are like, this is a fun, a fun conversation. Feel free to participate in the comments if you want to, say anything. I am watching them, and doing my best to keep track. But anyway, on that note, Alex, why don't you introduce yourself to the people who are listening now, and we'll be listening back later.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks, Kate, for having me. Love what you're doing and really appreciate it. So I'm Alex Kelloff. As you said, I'm running for the 3rd Congressional District in Colorado. Obviously, midterm elections, November 3rd. What's interesting about the 3rd District here, this is actually Lauren Boebert's old seat. And people may remember, if they're familiar with just national politics or this district in particular, she had served a few terms, was running again in 2024, and then national Republican leadership knew that she was likely to lose. So they moved her to the 4th congressional district in Colorado. So this is the district that she used to hold. Jeff Hurd backfilled her. He ran as a Republican. He's the freshman congressman in office right now. What's interesting about the district is it's one of the largest at-large districts in the country. Geographically, it's 53,000 square miles, 27 counties. I think that's important because I'll talk more about it as we have this conversation. It's a very rural district and very large. And it's very diverse, actually. So looking forward to talking more about it and why I've run and why I'm doing this. But that's the seat I'm running for.
Okay. Are you in a primary situation? Are you going straight to the general as a challenger? What's the lay of the land right now?
So the lay of the land is in Colorado, the primary is on June 30th. And right now I'm the only Democrat candidate running. I think it's possible things could change, but at this point it's unlikely, and I'll probably run unopposed on the Democratic ticket. So I'm really focused on the general election November 3rd right now.
Okay, good to know. That relieves me a little bit. I've got some other candidates who are in races coming up like
Yeah.
literally week. So I'm like
Yeah.
going to be doing some volunteerism for them as soon as I can find some time. And I'm like, oh my God, who is most urgent fires right now? Okay, so that's great to know. Tell us more about the at-large thing, because it's one of those like electoral like nuances that isn't present in every state, and not everyone has to deal with that. But I think, like you said, it's usually dealing with more rural areas and whatnot. So what's the deal? Why in the world do you have a 50,000 square mile district? Like, what is
Well, it's a good question. I should probably have the specific answer to that. I know that there was some redistricting that happened in 2022. It's just a function of uh, population density, and it's such that they had to carve out more than half the area of the state. So it's really an L shaped. It's all of the western slope, which uh, borders Utah, and then in the north it's bordering Wyoming, and in the south most of New Mexico. So it was just districted this way to pick up the population necessary to create a congressional district. It just happened to be as large as it is.
Right. Okay. That is good to know. It also makes it challenging to run though, because then you like
That's
are like your I'm in Virginia 3.
okay.
It's this big. like and it's funny, we're like there's like districts that are like carved around us in these huge L shapes, and then we're like
Yeah,
this tiny little blue in the middle.
exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And I mean, I can drive to and from like the ends of my district in an hour, a couple hours if I'm dealing with some bad traffic, but like nothing crazy. And so when I'm hearing about these districts that are literally the entire state, I'm like, God. And I've driven across Colorado before, so I know that that is like the endless mile. It's like
Yeah,
you are like, are we there yet?
yeah.
So that's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Awesome.
would add that winter also makes it challenging. I mean, our snowpack this year is down maybe the lowest in history, so it's a little bit better to drive around the state and the district than usual, but it's challenging because you have mountain passes that are closed. The largest population center in the district is Grand Junction, followed by Pueblo, and those are almost two exact opposites ends of the district. So to get around to each of these places is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
You can't fly, you have to drive, and yeah,
4-wheel drive. Usually.
definitely four-wheel drive, pickup
Yep.
truck. Yeah.
I used to live in Wyoming for a while,
Oh,
so
then
I'm
you know.
familiar with the driving through the mountain passes and well, that one's closed right now, use the other one and and whatnot.
Definitely.
So, yep,
De
very, very familiar with that. Okay. Why is Alex running for Colorado 3? Because most people are not exactly like, I want to be a politician when I grow up. Some maybe. But most people are like living their lives, trying to live their lives, and then something happens. So what was your something?
So it's pretty clear what my something was. It was the outcome of the 2024 elections and this
Mhm.
administration getting reelected. So I've never been involved in politics. I've never run for public office. My background is 30 plus years in business, primarily in the telecommunications industry. I'm the product of lifelong public servants. My dad's worked for the federal government as a cancer research doctor. He's been there
Mm,
going on 60 years. He's 82, still goes to work every day. Product of the public school systems. And I was fortunate to do well in my career in business. And, I felt like at some point I wanted to give back. And I think, as you mentioned, for me, there was a specific moment, and that was
mm.
the elections in 2024. And at that point, I decided, I really need to get off the sidelines and get involved and give back from the good fortune I've had. And when I started thinking about what that looked like, and I reflected on my family's history, it was, why don't I run for office? Why don't I run for Congress? So on my father's side, my great grandfather and his brothers immigrated to this country, specifically into Trinidad, Colorado, which is on the map behind me, which is in the district, in 1893. So my family roots, and interestingly, they came to dig coal because that's what the good jobs were back then.
Mhm.
So over 130 years of family history in the district. And then on my mom's side, she went to high school in Grand Junction, which, as I mentioned a moment ago, the largest city in the district. So the roots go back deep in the district. And I'm a product of not just public servants, but going back further in my family lineage, they were small business people in the district. So, I really, as I reflected on it, I said, why don't I just run? And here we are today.
I love that. And I love your reverence for public servants. I think one of the reasons we are where we are is the decades of denigrating public service as a scam, as for the less intelligent. Your dad is literally carrying cancer. like,
Trying,
it's
trying. Yeah.
right. It's just it's really upsetting. And as I'm a, you know, master of public administration, public
Mhm.
service is my specialty. I work in the private sector in nonprofits, but I, you know, have always civically engaged with a lot of public servants, and that whole like I'm from the government. I'm here to help is the worst thing to hear. Like, I hate that crap so much. I'm like, shut up. Like, the people who have provided me some of the best customer service out of literally the goodness of their heart have been working for the public. They're
Sure.
just, there's no other reason to be in those jobs. So I really appreciate that you have that perspective. Okay. We're gonna roll. Speaking of public servants and what we demand of them, we're gonna roll into the candidate of our dreams checklist. And as I said earlier, it is not a purity test, y'all. It is a conversation starter around 9 conceptual points that can go in a lot of different directions and can start a lot of different discourse about the changes we need to see. And what we're looking for from progressive candidates and independents and whatnot is a willingness to tackle these issues because with the GOP, by and large, with a few exceptions, there's no willingness to tackle this. There's no will to even we don't want to hold the Supreme Court accountable for their overreaches. We don't want to raise taxes. We don't, it's and so they refuse to engage. And I am down with anyone who will at least engage with these issues in good faith. So on that note, we'll start with number one. Takes
Sure.
$0 in corporate campaign money. Where are you on that as a
Yeah.
politician?
Well, let me first say I think there's way too much money in politics, and I think it's a shame. I think we need campaign finance reform. I think not just corporate money influencing the outcomes of elections and influencing those who are in power today or those seeking to get in power, but
Right.
there's just too much money generally. Um, and so look, I'm not for corporate campaign money. I've not taken any corporate campaign funding. In fact, I've taken none other than from individuals to my campaign, with the one exception of one of your senators, Tim Kaine, who was gracious to have his PAC support my campaign. So
Mhm.
I'm against corporate campaign money, but
Mhm.
we need reform generally in campaign finance law.
Yeah, agreed. And I recognize that, there are PACs that are legitimately organized around like collective fundraising and we're better to, we're stronger together and can advance candidates more effectively. That way I don't have a problem with the collective fundraising thing. And I'm actually a professional fundraiser, so I know of what I
Yeah,
speak.
I saw.
Like it doesn't have to be if there's transparency behind it, like go Godspeed. Like, you can look up literally anybody's stuff. It's when you're getting into the dark money, which corporate campaign money is notoriously dark. It's coming through some channel or whatever, and you can't see it. You don't know where it is. Like, which companies did that? We have no idea. Like,
Or you could create your own meme coin and have foreign buyers buy your meme coin and then use that money to raise funds for your campaign.
right. Nothing to see here, you all. There's no way that Saudi Arabia is influencing my decisions right now when they own right. Yeah, no, that's a dig on the president in case anyone was wondering what we were talking about. And a few other politicians as well. Okay, number two, term limits themselves and advances term limit legislation. This is always a robust conversation with anyone.
Yeah, look, I haven't taken like a firm public position on term limits, but I'm all for working towards implementing term limits in Congress, particularly in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Do you
And
have
I
like
and I
a
I figure I would term limit myself as well. Some
right?
people hate for those running to say that because they say, "Well, you never know what'll happen in the future," but I do feel pretty, strongly about that.
Yeah. Do you have like a range? Some people have thought about it enough to be like, yeah, I'm thinking about this many terms, or are you not? Like, are you still kind of in the decision making process of that?
Well, again, we're having a conversation, so I don't feel like I'm being held to this. I mean, I think, like, 10 years is a nice round number, but I don't know if that's where I'd come out, 5 terms.
Right. Yeah, no, I've heard 10 years several times. I actually had a candidate on last week, I think, who said like I think 10 years is long enough to do a body what he called a body of work, which I thought was a really smart way to say it, right?
Yeah,
Like
that
you
is.
go in there with kind of a portfolio of goals for your district, for federal policy and whatever. You need time. This is a big beast that we're running. It costs $4 trillion a year to run it. So you can't just be like, "Oh, I'll be there for 2 years and fix everything." Like,
Yeah,
that's
and you
not
need to learn the job like everything. If you've not been in
right.
that seat before, you need to build relationships. We'll talk, I'm sure, more about that. I think it's critical to build those trusted relationships, much of what we've lost, and you can't do that overnight. So,
Exactly. Love it. All right, number 3, reasserts their power over the Supreme Court.
so, when I read this, I'm looking at my sheet here. I'm curious as to what you mean by that, because in the Constitution we have three supposedly co-equal branches of government. So
Are
reasserting their
you gonna
power
let
over
me
us,
lobby you live?
please.
Amazing. All right. Putting on my lobbyist hat real quick. Okay. In Article 3, Section 2, which is the judiciary article, there's something called the exceptions clause. And this is something that it has been used historically. And actually, at the Supreme Court's birth, it was always understood that Congress set their docket. They actually did not take up any cases unless Congress gave them the case. Through a couple judiciary acts, Congress has ceded more of that authority to the point where now the Supreme Court deals with entirely at their own discretion their docket. And at this point, if you watch the Supreme Court as closely as I do, they also determine the questions that are asked of them, which is
Hmm.
not a thing that any other judge in the federal judiciary is doing. So you don't have judges usually looking at the parties and saying, "But don't you actually want to bring this question before me?" You're supposed to sue for your question or whatever, bring suit for whatever it is that you're trying to get. And then when you are appealing, you're supposed to ask a question. And the Supreme Court decides if whether or not it makes sense for them to answer that question. What this game has turned into is them brazenly, like in public, in opinions, written opinions, literally saying things like, "We should probably at some point talk about insert thing here," which is a cue to PACs in particular who want to advance certain lawsuits um, to the Supreme Court. So anyway, I say all this to say it was not always like this. And there's this kind of this fan fiction around the Supreme Court that they've always been an entity unto themselves, three co-equal branches of government, and yada yada. My personal theory, and I realize people can argue with me about it, I'm also not a lawyer or a legal scholar, so that's fine. This is based purely on a ton of research and lots of history and like that and that kind of thing. And also the opinions of other legal scholars who actually know
Sure.
what they're talking about. That the Supreme Court, well, first of all, that Congress, let's back up. Congress is ultimately the backstop for the other two branches. You can see it in the way the Constitution was written. First of all,
Yeah.
they're Article 1.
Article 1, right?
Right.
And sure.
They have preeminence. And also that Congress shows up in the other two articles. They show up in Article 2, they show up in Article 3. They're expected to kind of be the final say. And even when we talk about like judicial review when it comes to the Supreme Court, and again, I know there are plenty of opinions across the legal scholarship about this. The Supreme Court, their ability to kind of be the final say was something that they took through action, not something that was given to them by the founders, not something that's in the Constitution. So I put this in here as as more of like, as I'm trying to advance progressive candidates, it's like I want this to be something that is being thought about.
Yeah.
That the Supreme Court can actually be held to account. There is actually even history of jurisdiction stripping after a case has been heard by the Supreme Court, effectively nullifying their decision. So if a progressive Congress went in and said, "We're going to strip the jurisdiction away from you when it comes to the Dobbs decision, the one that overturned Roe v. Wade. You no longer have jurisdiction over that case. It therefore invalidates that decision."
Right.
So it can be a way. I say this as a way. First of all, I know everyone's like term limits for Supreme Court. You have to amend the Constitution to do that. The Constitution is pretty clear on
Yeah.
lifetime appointments, and that's a long term. Like if you want that to be a thing, that's a long term goal. Jurisdiction stripping is something that's already constitutional. And so it's something that progressive, members of Congress could actually look at and be like, what are some things that we can do more immediately to undo some of the damage that the Supreme Court has done
Got
to
it.
the people?
No,
So,
that was super helpful. I
yeah,
learned something new. So thank you. I mean, I would just say that Congress writes and passes laws, and I think the courts should adjudicate those laws. And I think you'll hear from me throughout this conversation that I think Congress has sort of forfeited and abdicated its responsibility in being the legislative branch. And so if we were getting back to do the work of what Congress was intended to do, we would be passing laws that then the courts could adjudicate. But we
Right.
need to be passing those laws so
Right.
we're clear as to where we stand as a country and what our priorities are.
Amazing. Yep, I love that. Okay, number 4, raises wages well, I do 4 and 5 together usually. Raises wages and reinstates corporate tax marginalization and increases tax marginalization for high net worth individuals. This is the tax the rich bullets.
Yeah.
But what is your theory around all of this? Because there's a lot of ways to tackle this one.
Well, yeah, there's a number of things in there, right? And so I think with respect to wages, I am fully in support, and we need to strengthen collective bargaining. We've sort of gotten away from that. So I'm very much in favor of that. We have a lot of trade unions and other unions in this district in particular, particularly in Pueblo. So it's very important to the constituents here, and I very much believe in that. I mean, stepping back for a second and talking about just the tax code, it's way too complex. There's all these loopholes there. If you achieve a certain amount of wealth in this country, it's very easy to avoid paying taxes. If you have an asset base, whether in equities or what have you, or real estate, you can just borrow against that, take out a loan and live off the loan and maybe reinvest that money into the stock market and never pay taxes on the loan. So there are all these ways that the tax code should be reformed and restructured to make it more simple, make it more fair. And I think there are other things that the code itself should do and very much, I think, to incentivize small business and formation and entrepreneurship, of which is very important in this district. In the district I'm running in the third in Colorado, there's not a lot of large business. And in my family, as I said at the outset, we're small business people. And so I'd like to see tax reform take place that incentivize strong business formation, which leads to good job creation.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And one reason that I say, reinstating corporate tax marginalization, and not everyone knows this, the corporate tax rate is now flat. It's the same for Verizon as it is for your parents' small business, which is ridiculous.
Mhm.
And the higher net worth corporations end up paying effective tax rates much lower, sometimes in the
Absolutely.
negative compared to a small business. So, in the before times, before the TCJA, which was in Trump one, the bottom tax rate for a small business was like 17% for the first 50,000. Well, everything got smushed to 21%. So their taxes went up. Meanwhile, and people who were, or I should say, corporations making tens of millions of dollars that were originally taxed at like, closer to 40% came all the way down to 21. And it was a totally not progressive move. And like you said, it disincentivized
Yeah.
small businesses
Yeah.
because it's like my taxes went up now. And and there's no like incentive to participate in any of that because it's all the same. And
Yeah,
you
and there's
don't
also a lot of things that have happened in the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill that I don't think we haven't really seen the repercussions of some of those things as it respects some of the tax code, which could be very harmful and negative over time to people like yourself or things I've been involved with in my former career. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, right. And especially if you're talking about small business, the big beautiful bill, like pro business tax things that they did in there, it's like pro mega million
yeah,
corporations. Like
exactly.
that's like when let's be
Exactly.
clear. Amazing. All right. Number 6 bans stock buybacks, and this is the practice of a corporation buying back its own stock. So where do you stand on this?
So I'll probably disagree with you on this one.
Okay,
I
that's
think
fine.
I
Let's go.
think that oftentimes it's tax efficient for companies to buy back their stock rather than say return cash to shareholders through dividends. And with, not everyone clearly, but we still have people that have pensions and we have people in 401ks now that
Mm-hmm.
actually stock buybacks sometimes benefit them by, increasing the value of the equities that they hold. So this is one where maybe through a deeper conversation, I understand your perspective, but on the face of it, I probably am not for banning stock buybacks.
Well, and one of the reasons that I have kind of, for those who haven't seen my full list, there is a kind of a disclaimer after the bullet of ban stock buybacks. I say entirely ideally. However,
Yeah,
there's
I
also
noted.
yeah, there's also proposals to say it you can't buy back your own stock if you're taking some kind of federal dollar. So if you're participating in a federal contract, because I don't think it's a far cry to say that if you're using taxpayer money, it's ridiculous that you're buying back your own stock. Like, you need to be doing something else with that. Now, that, again, there is a range of agreement and disagreement on that. But for everyone's like edification, this used to be illegal before Reagan was president. It was considered market manipulation. And I do think that there needs to at least be some sort at the floor. There needs to be some sort of regulation. But we can also just like if the other tax things are in place, though, it also might not be like part of the reason that it's become the beast that it has. We broke $1 trillion in stock buybacks in 2025 is because there's so much like money, there's so much like capital laying around right
Yeah,
now that they're like,
absolutely.
okay,
Yeah.
now I can spend $500 billion on a
Well,
buyback. And
I think you raised some points that being a point. I think throughout the global financial crisis, the housing crisis in 2008, the Federal Reserve, not to get all wonky here, right, but printed a lot of money to get us out of that. And we've continued, you know, throughout then the teens and then certainly into the 2020s with COVID. And we've created a glut of money that has driven inflation, driven up prices overall. I think while maybe I don't agree on the buybacks, there's many things we probably agree on with respect to fiscal and financial discipline and monetary discipline by the government that I think because we haven't had that discipline has led to a lot of problems. And so I think there are many areas there that I would focus on, having come from a background somewhat in finance, and I think I understand that well, that we could do to make lives better for everyone, to reduce the cost of living, reduce inflation, and the like.
yeah, no, that makes all the sense in the world. I've kind of sometimes in other conversations likened it to like clearly we have too many toys in the toy chest right here. Like, we need to do something. So whether it's we find other things for the toys to do or we get rid of the toys, either way we just need to become more productive, I think, with the capital that
I
we're
agree. I agree. And
yeah.
the other thing I would say, because it's somewhat related to these financial things we're talking about, is I think it's completely absurd that this administration is taking ownership positions in private companies. That is what China does, right?
I
Like
know.
that is not what a traditional business person in this country that believes
Right.
not unfettered free markets, but free markets with government oversight and guardrails, et cetera. This is the exact opposite of that. So, again, unbelievable what this administration is doing, and completely, in my mind, corrupt. You're picking winners and losers in the market, and this creates a lot of corruption. So,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, when they bought those shares in Intel, I was like, "What is happening?" And then Nvidia invested in Intel, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, that's and then Nvidia did a buyback. Like, it was literally like, I remember watching that series of headlines going like,
yeah,
"Okay." Like,
absolutely,
that
absolutely,
makes sense, everybody. We can see you with our eyeballs doing this,
yes,
you know that.
yeah, yeah,
So Alex, I really appreciate how you've engaged with me over the last couple of points of like, you know, it I keep saying like this is not a purity test and it's not all or nothing. And there can be other ways to deal with the exact
sure,
same problem.
yeah,
And when you're talking you know, to business folks, they can get really freaked out when you start talking about like increasing tax marginalization and whatever. They don't always understand that you're like, I'm mostly just trying to punish Tesla, really not you at all. Like, you're not going to be in the crosshairs of this. And there's ways we can write elegant policy to make sure
right,
that it's not like that, that it's not a
agreed,
bludgeon. I would say that the TCJA and then the big beautiful bill were bludgeons, right? They were just like huge sledgehammers that came in and like tax cuts or whatever. But it's like,
yeah.
unless you were a mega corporation, you can't really take advantage of most of it. Like, and it's really And then it's detrimental to workers, and so therefore,
Yep.
for a lot of small businesses, that's the end game,
And
right?
it's driving more unequal growth, right? That we've
Right.
already had now for generations. We've lost collective bargaining, or that's been
Yeah.
weakened over time. And I think, much like I was saying, my motivation for running for office, I was very concerned with this administration coming back to office where we would be in 12 months' time. So here we are, 12 months' time out. And I look back and say, with all humility, like I was right to be concerned. We have legislation like the One Big Beautiful Bill being passed that's driving a deeper wedge and creating more inequality as we move forward. So,
Right. The K-shaped, the dreaded K.
yeah.
Okay, so next bullet, invest in a robust, nimble, and strategic administrative state. I think I know where you stand, based on earlier in the conversation.
Look, I love it. Like, in fact, when I went through your 9 points and picked out, one maybe to gravitate to, this was the one. I think we can make government more efficient. We should make government more efficient. Doge is not the way to do that. But we should leverage technology. I've worked with government agencies in my past, and some of them were run good-hearted people with the right intent, but they didn't have the right tools. They didn't have the right technology tools. And so we should implement AI where it's safe to do so and can make government more productive and work for the people and more efficient. And to the extent there's fraud, waste, and abuse, we should root that out. But
Right.
we need to go about that smartly. You need a scalpel to do it, not a sledgehammer. And the other thing I'd say is, like, we are not making the critical investments in government that we need to make, that our our forebears, our ancestors made, because they knew making these investments in the community were long-term investments that would pay off. And, that's one of the main things about my platform that I'm running on, having been involved in the investment world, viewing these things as critical investments that we need to make that earn a return on that investment over time. So whether that's Medicare, Medicaid, whether that's physical infrastructure like what I've been involved with, so our transportation systems, our communication systems, our utility infrastructure, our air traffic control system. I believe in robust but nimble, effective government, but we need to invest in that to
Yeah.
have that.
Right. Yeah, you can't starve it and then be like, "Why aren't you running fast enough?" Like, and
Exactly.
that's kind of been that's again, that's very like Reaganomics, sort of, and even Clinton, like that
Yeah,
that very
absolutely.
very much the exact same. People don't like it when I talk about that, but I'm like, it kept going. Like there was no shift, and it really we like you said, we failed to plant trees that we needed 20 years ago, that we needed to plant 20 years ago. We need to plant them right now, if
Yes.
we're going to have a hope at all
Yeah.
for a future government that is able to deal with our issues.
Yeah. I mean, a
Which
good
is
example for me, for this district in particular, in Colorado and all 7 states that are part of the Colorado River Compact, most people wouldn't be aware of this.
mm,
Except if you live in this district, and then you're very aware of it. It's the water in the Colorado River that sustains the 7 western, southwestern states, and this was a compact that was negotiated in 1922 and was up for renegotiation 100 years later, and we're still working on that. It's, again, this, I'll call this critical infrastructure, the river, at which we need to invest in to ensure that we have clean water. It's important for agriculture, for farmers, for cattle ranchers here, and for drinking water. And, this district in particular very much relies on that. So these are investments we need to make for the future. And as you said, we need to make those now.
right. Yeah. Couldn't amazing. Amen. Number 8, advances universal health care and education. Kind of a nice little segue into I do put these in order for a reason, but
Yeah,
but
definitely. And on this one, I believe in universal health care. I think my campaign, we're still formulating what we think the right solution is to this. But I would say I think it is universal health care. People need a coverage option and they need to be covered. And talking about this district specifically, because it is such a rural district, one thing I've very much come to appreciate is, you know, in rural districts like this, or across America for that matter, you said you lived in Wyoming, so you understand it there. The cost of healthcare is going to be more here than living where you live now in a more dense urban area where a hospital is maybe a few miles away. Here, based on the cuts that presumably my opponent, Jeff Hurd, voted for in the One Big Beautiful Bill, it guts Medicaid, which is absolutely necessary and required to keep our rural hospitals open. So the effect of that is our rural hospitals or departments within the hospitals, OBGYN, the emergency room, closing. The residents, the constituents of this district have to drive like 2 or 3 hours to the next closest facility to get treated or get health care. And that's a life or death situation. So again, these are critical investments we need to make. Healthcare in this country can only be solved on a bipartisan basis.
Right.
And we need to come together and exert and show real leadership to get that done. I was looking back about bipartisan leadership that took place, and I just went back recent, so looked at Biden, right? You had the CHIPS Act that was passed on a bipartisan basis. You had the Infrastructure Act, of which I have a lot of experience in, that was passed on a bipartisan basis.
Yeah.
We don't need like this administration and the sycophantic, Congress that's bending the knee to the president to only do what he wants to do particularly when it's bad policy. I would love it if Trump came out and said, we're going to solve healthcare. Let's come together on a bipartisan basis. That's the
Right.
good thing to do for the country. Clearly, he's not doing that. And the Republican controlled Congress has no interest in that either.
No. Yeah, I definitely, I had someone comment on one of my videos today that was like, if he would just do like literally anything for us, like we would probably all settle down. Cause like we're so tired at this point. It's like any hope would be nice, but it's like I'm like, yeah, he will not.
I
Like,
want to riff on that for a minute because I hate to say give credit where credit's due. One thing I hear when I'm out on the campaign trail, when people say if they like something about this administration, is
mm,
he's perceived and the administration is perceived as doing something. Most people would agree with like they don't like what that something is, but at least there's an appreciation that something is being tried or done. And I will say we do need more of that. We shouldn't be fearful, and maybe I'm naive because my business is my background's in business, but like we should reach across the aisle, and in these things where we agree, we should work to common solutions that help everyday Americans. So
yeah. No, the energy, it's like if we redirected that energy into productive ways, like we could get a lot done, apparently. you know?
absolutely, yeah.
Um,
And I
I
wanna
mean,
bring I wanna bring that same energy to Congress, right? But be open-minded about we're not always gonna agree on everything, but let's use that energy to push forward the best policy that we can that helps, obviously, the constituents in this district, but within Colorado and, across the country.
yeah, absolutely. You know, when I because again, I work in the private nonprofit sector, even though my training is in public administration, I am constantly kind of not battling, but like trying to strike that balance between it's a business, like anything else, like, and it has different goals than maybe your regular
Sure,
for-profit business, but it still is mission, everything should be mission oriented. Even for-profit businesses that are really good at what they do, they're mission oriented, right? They have
sure,
like,
yeah,
thoughts besides just I sell a bunch of stuff and make a bunch of money. And, I think that if we had more minds that I believe yours is based on what I'm seeing right now that are
thank you.
looking at it of like this is a business machine and we can figure out how to broaden the revenue base and make it more efficient and do amazing services for our people and whatever, and then we go home after 10 years and celebrate and somebody else goes in and does better. It's like that kind of like blood circulation, if you will, is like what I'm definitely looking for that for the next
Yeah,
Congress. I'm like, I want to see the big beautiful bill energy in obviously not those policies. And
exactly, exactly.
I agree with voters that you're talking to of like, well, at least like yeah, he's running and breaking things, but at least like there's signs of life, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um And at the end of the day, if people don't feel that energy, I think that was like the whole Biden admin like struggle was there were, like you said, there were laws passed. It wasn't like they didn't do anything.
Sure.
Whether that translated into things that the everyday voter could touch and feel and experience for themselves, you know,
Yeah,
not a
agreed.
whole lot.
Completely
Right.
agree.
Um, okay, last one. Commits to multilateral non-interventionist foreign policy.
Well, I would say what we've done with respect to our allies and friends is a complete travesty. I have pretty significant international experience myself, and I value those friendships, and I know how important they are for our national security, for our prosperity. Now, have there been problems with shipping manufacturing jobs overseas? Yeah, and we can talk about those and what the real solution should be. I don't think it's tariffs, by the way, that just create chaos and uncertainty, particularly when they're on and off again every day. But look, I very much believe in the US's leadership in the world that creates the world a much safer place and hopefully creates opportunity and space to continue to pursue the American dream here. It hasn't been perfect, but I definitely believe in that. And I think we need to get back to treating our friends and allies as friends and allies. And where we need to be tough with them, whether it's funding NATO or what have you, we need to be tough with them. But it doesn't mean turning our back on them.
Right. Yeah. So many of the things when it was like, oh, NATO needs to fund more defense or come to Ukraine's aid more themselves or whatever, insert grievance here, or we're mad at Venezuela for whatever we're mad about. Okay, fine. Have we tried diplomacy, or are we really like just gonna sit here and do this? And I'm not saying there haven't been diplomatic overtures. But certainly not by this administration, in term 2. And it's been just absolutely maddening for it to be like they demand something 1 hour, and literally the next hour, they're, like, invading the country. And I'm like, "What? What are you doing?"
Well, and by
Um,
the way, on the excuse or auspices of he was a drug dealer, dealing in narcotics, when just the week before Trump had pardoned the former president of Honduras for the exact same thing, who was
exactly.
convicted in a court of law in the U.S.
I know.
for serving a sentence.
In our prison, like, in our country.
Yes,
What are we
yes,
talking about? Yeah, no, it's clearly a pretense for, you know, all the things that we won't,
yeah.
like, belabor, because everyone, again, has eyes in their head, and can see it. Um, yeah, no, again, I think I really do love, Alex, the way that you're kinda grabbing these issues and saying, like, there's complexity here, right? Do we have something to be mad at NATO about? Maybe. Maybe we do. Is doing it this way solving literally any of that? No, it's not. It's
Yep.
and, like, let's, like, try to solve it in more productive ways and
Well, not
more.
only that, the way we're going about it is making the U.S. less safe and the world less safe.
Right,
So if he's out there creating a narrative that he's doing this for the American people, in fact, our NATO allies or other Five Eyes allies, of which make up the national intelligence community in the world, from our allies, like they've stopped sharing classified information with us.
right,
It makes us less safe. So
right.
anyway, I know we're I know
No.
we're in agreement there.
Yeah, no, I mean, the soft power cannot be underestimated, and we have ceded all
True.
of that in favor of hard power, and it's like, but even our ability to use that is kinda contingent on having a few
Absolutely.
people sharing, satellite images
Absolutely.
with us, like the basics.
Absolutely.
Amazing. We have a comment here directly for you, Alex,
Okay.
about how Jeff Hurd is not having town halls and they want to see you in them. So what is your plan for the specific thing? And we're actually at the point of the interview where we talk about what you're going to do for Colorado 3 specifically. So
Okay.
this is all,
Great.
you can wrap this all up in here. What's your attack plan for ramping up your campaign's reach? And then what are you going to do for Colorado 3 if they elect you?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Very timely. We were talking about the calendar earlier today. We're doing a large town hall in Grand Junction coming up in March. Keep an eye out for that. We're expecting well over 1,000 people at that town hall. So we really are ramping up now that the new year is behind us and moving forward. A number of town halls, meet and greets, fundraisers, the like across the district. Again, huge district, so it's difficult. But one of the things I set a goal for myself going into the year end and just last year in 2025 was to get to all 27 counties before the end of the year, and we accomplished that. So you're going to see a lot more of me. We're ramping up um, uh, event, things like this, formats like this. I'm on a live radio show, the largest radio show in Colorado, on Thursday morning of this week. Did a podcast earlier today as well. Love being on with you now. So we really are ramping that up. Keep an eye out. And I'll end with the tag of our website and social media handles. But look, with respect to this district in particular, and what I'm running on is many of the things we've already talked about, right? So creating good jobs, lowering the cost of living, ensuring people can afford to live here, raise a family, buy a house. And a lot of people talk about housing, and I think maybe the media thinks it's like apartment buildings, multifamily housing. I really think about single family homes. People want a yard. They want a yard where the dog can run around. They want a
Mhm.
garage. We need more of that. My background has been in building physical infrastructure, particularly in the telecommunications industry. But when you see this administration doing things like curtailing clean energy, right? Whether it's solar, wind, of which we have a lot of solar here in this district. And
Yes.
he's sort of put the kibosh on some of the solar projects we have. Well, these create good jobs. They put electrons on the grid that lower our utility bills. That very in particular is what I'm focused on. I hear a lot about that from the constituents in the district. And I know that's important all over the US. Second is, and it's somewhat specific to this district. You'll appreciate it having lived in Wyoming. Is our public lands, our outdoor recreation. I'll call it the environment, but it's also clean water, keeping the water. I talked about the Colorado River Compact. It's a way of life that sustains this district, whether it's in agriculture for the farmers and ranchers, whether it's outdoor recreation, whether it's the ski industry, whether it's hunters, we need to protect our public lands. And I will go after Jeff Hurd for a moment. When Jeff Hurd took office as a freshman congressman a year ago in January, the very first piece of legislation he proposed was called the Productive Public Lands Act. And you know where it came from? Verbatim almost out of Project 2025, to basically sell off and lease off our public lands. And because he's representing Colorado District 3, it very much impacts here. The interesting thing is that one, outdoor recreation is a larger economic industry in this district than natural resource extraction. And two, when you look at the leases and the really more leases for the Bureau of Land Management for oil and gas extraction, you look at the price of oil and gas today and what it costs to actually extract those natural resources on the western slope here in this district, they would never pursue extraction. It's unprofitable. But the thing is, we're tying up these lands for a 20-year option. So if the price of gas did go up, so it made it profitable, then they can drill. But now we've tied it up for 20 years at basically taxpayer subsidies. So that's an issue that's very passionate for me and very important in the district. And finally, what we've already talked about, the rule of law and ensuring that Congress is upholding its constitutional obligation as a co-equal branch of government and ensure that they're doing their job.
I love it. I think Colorado is in great hands with you. And again, as someone who used to live out west, I could not echo more like how vital the land
It
is
really
to
is.
all. We lived in Jackson, so
Oh,
right at the foot of the Tetons. Woke up every day, could see the Grand Teton, outside my door, and I, I was always like it's so awe-inspiring. It's not like the East Coast, we have our own beauties. We have the ocean. I'm right by the ocean and everything. And
yeah.
I am a water girl, so I'm a bit biased to where I am. But I remember the first time I saw that mountain range, like drove over a hill and
Oh, yeah.
saw saw the Teton Range right in front of me, and I was like, there's just nothing. If you haven't experienced it in person, there is sort of a spiritual thing that happens there.
It
And it's tragic what some members of Congress want to, especially ones who claim to represent y'all, want to do with them.
and it's
With
not and you know it. You lived out west, like, in a beautiful place like Jackson. Colorado District 3 is better, but we'll leave, we'll leave.
fine,
I do love Jackson. It's a great ski resort. I like snowmobiling up there actually a lot.
yes,
But it's not a partisan thing, right? Like the hunters, the anglers, the skiers, the snowmobilers, the bird watchers. I mean, I think the rafters, we can all agree that this is one of the reasons we live here and it needs to be protected.
100%. Awesome, Alex. This is the homework time that we give to everybody. What can people do? You have a massive district, and so you can't be with your feet, with your 2 feet, in all parts of it at all times. And this is gonna be a race this year. I think for everyone, especially if they're challenging an incumbent like this, it is going to be nonstop. So, what can people do to help you, whether they're in uh, CD3, whether they are outside of it? Like, if I always tell people, it's like if you're happy with the representation, if you've gotten a goose, for instance, in Colorado, and you're like, I'm good, like he can stay there. Um, then there are other districts in your state, that need your assistance.
Sure,
So
sure.
where can people find you? What can they do for you? Do you have any special projects? Sometimes candidates have really unique ways of dealing with this. So,
Yeah, so thanks a lot. Appreciate the time for the plug. So very easy. It's Alex, Alex, Kelloff, Kelloff, like in Frank.com is my website. Um, please go there. I appreciate obviously any financial support.
mhm,
Because it's such a large district, it is an expensive district. We have 4 media markets here. I'm sure, Kate, where you live, it's probably one. So we have to deal with 4. It's just a very expensive district to cover. So you can financially support there, appreciate it. There's a mailing address if you want to send a check. All of our social media handles are at Alex Kelloff CO for Colorado. And we're on every Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Blue Sky, uh, obviously Substack, etc. So please follow. The best, my ask is, other than financial support, is follow on social media. Please forward for others to follow, because that's the most cost effective way and efficient way for us to reach the people in this huge district. Um, and then, I would also give the plug. We feel very good about where the race is right now. I think it's statistically a dead heat with Jeff Hurd and with the blue wave that I think's coming. I think we will take back this seat, but it's important to get out and vote and not be apathetic, right? And so the primary is on June 30th. Right now I'm running unopposed, but get out and vote anyway on June 30th for the primary, or come the general election November 3rd. Would appreciate your vote, and get out there and vote, and make sure you vote in the local elections and the national elections. And it's important, and we all need to do our part.
absolutely. I think with these far flung districts, like something that comes up probably more is transportation to polling places.
Mhm.
If you are in a position where you can get people to the polls who would maybe not otherwise be able to reach there, do that. That is something that I'm going to be highlighting a lot more as we go through this whole midterm season. There are plenty of willing voters. They just don't have a way to get there. Older
And
adults are
Colorado is very
and
progressive with respect to mail-in voting. In fact, that's
mhm.
why Trump has come after our state,
Yes.
because, I think we have something like 91% of mail-in voting, particularly by older folks, and that's on both Democrats and
Mhm.
Republicans. So,
Yeah.
it's we have a progressive state where it's actually quite easy to get your vote in and get it in on time. But and we'll be rolling out initiatives, working across statewide with other races, to ensure that we make it easy for people to vote. And
Amazing.
look, the other thing I'll just finish with is, the Hispanic and Latino community is huge in Colorado, and it's particularly huge in this district. And so we need to ensure that our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers feel safe about voting. And they've shown in some of the recent more special elections that were local, a real a real appetite and desire to get out and vote. And we just need to keep that going, not just in that community, but community overall. But it is very important. I want to give a shout out to my friends and neighbors and constituents here in the district.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Because I think another thing about, like, being a companion to someone voting is that safety.
Yeah,
There's safety in numbers, and some people are like, "Yeah, I wanna go vote. I don't feel safe doing it."
yeah,
Um, I'm afraid, I am legitimately afraid, and that's a legitimate fear. I'm not here to tell anybody that they're overreacting after what we've been seeing. There's clearly going
absolutely.
to be intimidation used, like, that's obvious. Um so I love all of that so much. So everyone, you have an assignment. And oh, I wanted to say one thing about voting in the primary. Vote in primaries, and this sounds crazy, but even if it's the person's unopposed, because in this particular strategery of this year, when it comes to the GOP, they are they are raising a lot of money, but they are starting to have a bit of a pinch as far as dollars.
Yeah,
And what you can do is, if you vote in the primary, even if it's like an unopposed, like, Democratic primary, and show that it's gonna be a competitive race, it starts
that's
to
right.
spread their dollars thinner
That's right.
across the entire country.
That's a
Because
great point, and
right,
I thank you for saying that. I
yeah,
think it also earn more media, so more
right,
attention from the race,
right.
and I'm really happy you said that, and I'm gonna start using that.
Yeah, yeah, no, because it we like, this is also a group project.
Yeah,
We're all like, this race affects that one, and whatever. They can't be everything everywhere all at once, which is why we flood the zone, which is why we do full court press, because
that's good.
then it's like, oh crap, we need to divert some money to herd, but that means someone's over here isn't going to get the
Right,
media buy, and like, oh no, we've just lost two races, like, so.
for
Anyway,
sure.
strategery. Um, Alex, thank you so much for your time this evening. I This was a great doubleheader night for me,
Yeah, you're busy.
and really enjoyed it. And again, I really appreciate your willingness to dive into complexity, to disagree, to have civil discourse. Hello, this is great. Like, this is what we want to see in Congress. So everyone, have a great night. I will send out, as per usual, I send out the full recording. I will have links to all of Alex's things, pointing out where you can donate, volunteer, and then all the voting deadlines, registration, and all that sort of thing for Colorado 3. Um, Alex, will definitely try to have you on again,
Definitely,
as we get
I
closer
look
to the
forward to it.
general.
Well, thanks
But yeah,
so much, Kate. I really appreciate it, and look forward to doing it again, and thank you everyone for joining in the interest.
absolutely. Have a great night, everyone.
You too, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.